And so, first of all, thank you both of you for Rachel, for creating the opportunity. It's something Rachel's really gifted at, is just creating connections and creating opportunity. And she has a laundry list of accomplishments. But one of the big things that she's going to talk about today goes much beyond nutrition. And it goes into how it's not just your physical, it's your mental. And it's your mind that ultimately will hold you back from freedom, even if you fix all of the physical. So, Rachel, welcome to the stage.
Double intros. That is a first for me, so I feel so loved here. Freedom. It's something we don't think about until it's gone. I was 24 years old, sitting at the edge of a cold leather chair in a sterile doctor's office when I heard the words that would change everything. We may need to remove your entire large intestine. And in that moment, everything went quiet. I couldn't think. I could literally hear the hum of the fluorescent lights and the crinkle of paper within my hand, but nothing felt real. I was 24 years old, and on the outside looking in, I was the epitome of health. I was a fitness model, competing in bodybuilding competitions. I was counting every calorie, macro, and waking up at 5 a.m. every single day to train. But on the inside, my health was deteriorating. I was now on 5+ medications after spending the last year going doctor to doctor, doing every scan you can imagine, colonoscopy, CT scan, MRI, only to have a label slapped on me of IBS or irritable bowel syndrome. And I was sent on my way. Over that next year, I continued to get worse and worse, where one day I literally remember lying in bed, crying, and just saying over and over again, this isn't my life. This isn't real. This isn't my life. This isn't real. This isn't my life. This isn't real. My whole sense of worth up until this moment had been my physical body. I grew up as a gymnast. I was a dancer. I was a fitness model competing in bodybuilding competitions. And I felt completely betrayed by it. But more than that, I felt like a prisoner in my own body. And I had never felt more powerless in my entire life. Freedom. It's something we don't think about until it's gone. On a day-to-day basis, it rarely crosses our mind. Within seconds, we can order groceries to our doorstep. With a few taps on our phone, we can book a car, book a flight, connect with a friend on the other side of the world. We have endless options for entertainment, education, and opportunities at our fingertips. And yet, living in America, a nation founded on the revolutionary principles of freedom as our inherent birthright, the Declaration of Independence declared that we are endowed with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have more external freedom than any other nation, and yet we feel more anxious, more exhausted, and more trapped than ever. Our mental health crisis. Depression rates have doubled in just 10 years. Anxiety is the fastest growing diagnosis in the country, afflicting over 40 million adults. Suicide rates have surged by 30% since 2000. Among preteens, suicide is rising at a staggering 8.2% per year. And today, the U.S. has the highest age-adjusted suicide rate since 1941, levels we haven't seen since the Great Depression or World War II. Our physical health crisis. Nearly half of the U.S. population is obese, and by 2030, we're on track to surpass 50%. Heart disease kills 1 in 5 Americans every year. Type 2 diabetes now affects 1 in 10 adults and drains $327 billion annually. Autoimmune diseases have spiked by 50% in the last decade, now impacting over 24 million Americans. Chronic illnesses, many preventable, are now the norm. This paradox reveals a deeper truth. External freedom, while important, is not enough for total liberation. My name is Rachel Scheer, and I'm a certified functional medicine practitioner. I received my degree in nutrition science and dietetics from Baylor University. But more than that, I'm somebody who's walked the path from illness to wellness. I'm somebody who's broken generational trauma, and I'm somebody who knows what it's like to feeling completely limited in every area of your life, mentally, physically, financially, to go to complete liberation. And I've had the honor to help others walk that same path. Some of these women are in this room here today. And today I want to talk to you all about freedom. But not the kind of freedom that comes from reaching a certain level of success or even being able to travel anywhere that you want, which is incredible. I travel all over the world. But the kind of freedom that comes from when you reclaim your most fundamental birthright, the right to be fully alive within your own body. So who wants to talk about freedom? All right. So what is freedom? Freedom is the ultimate expression of free will. Free will is your ability to think, choose, create, and live the life you desire. But here's what most people miss. True freedom isn't just the absence of external constraints. It's the presence of internal capacity. It's the presence of internal capacity. We're going to talk a lot about that today. And there's 3 types of freedom that I like to talk about. One is external freedom. So this is the container. This is our civil liberties. This is what our founding fathers fought for and what we inherited. This is freedom of tyranny. And then there is physical freedom. So this is the foundation. This is our health. We're going to spend a lot of time here today. And then it is freedom of consciousness, which I believe is the ultimate determinant of our freedom. That moment sitting in the doctor's office, being told that I needed to have my entire large intestine removed, became one of my greatest teachers. Because in that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I made a decision to take radical ownership over my health and over my healing. And I left. And I literally became obsessed with learning everything that I could about the gut and the gut microbiome and how these little microbes in our gut control everything from our hormones, our thyroid, to our adrenals, to our brain. I did various elimination diets. I incorporated supplements to help regenerate the gut lining. I did the deep, deep inner work to heal my relationship with myself, my identity, the beliefs, the place that I was operating from. And it didn't happen overnight, but eventually I could go a few days, eventually a few weeks, eventually, my body did heal. And I could avoid having my entire large intestine removed. Stay here. But more than that, even more than that, I began to reclaim my capacity to feel, my capacity to be fully alive, my capacity to not just live in survival mode every single day, just trying to get by. I reclaimed my capacity. Health is the foundation to true freedom, because without health, without a resilient body, a regulated nervous system, and a clear mind, your choices are limited. Not by the world, but by your own capacity. It's limited by your own capacity. So let's talk about this. The science of capacity. What is capacity? Your capacity is your ability to handle all of what life brings you without breaking down, physically, mentally, and emotionally. It is your ability to endure a challenge, to heal, to recover, and to come back stronger than where you were before. It's your ability to create, to love, and contribute at your highest level. Capacity. But capacity isn't just about willpower, and it's not about mindset. It's the dynamic interplay of biology, psychology, and environment. So let's talk about some of these things that influence our capacity, because this is really what creates true freedom. So biological influences, genetics, it does play a role, but in functional medicine, right, we know about epigenetics. So we can turn various genes on and off. But trauma, PTSD, it's passed down through genetics, which plays a role in our capacity. The gut-brain axis, our hormones, metabolic health, our nervous system plays a huge role in our capacity, sleep quality, environmental influences, toxic burden, our ability to detox and clear toxins from our body, because that's going to impact our nervous system, our brain, and our gut, social environment, the relationships that we're in. Does that have an impact on our capacity? Yes. Physical environment, getting sunlight in the morning. Air quality, our circadian rhythm. Psychological and beliefs. What you believe about yourself. Our beliefs, our identity plays a massive role. We're going to talk about that. Meaning and purpose, the why behind why we do what we do. Dr. Hans Silly, he's the father of stress research. He talks about the difference between eustress and distress. What's the difference? Eustress, it comes from, stress physically in the body, but often towards working towards something you feel in deep purpose and calling towards. That affects the body very different than a distress, where it is you're feeling like you're in a 9-to-5 in a job that you hate and you're burnt out and you're exhausted. Are those going to affect the body differently? Yeah, the difference between eustress and distress, that comes from meaning and purpose, the why behind what we do. I can imagine Becca and Liz. They have had moments of burnout and exhaustion. But why they can continue to do this and actually over time build a level of resiliency in the process of this is because it's a eustress. Does that mean that they need to pull back and rest at times? Of course. But they're operating from a place of purpose. And so that helps them really widen their capacity and their ability to handle that much more. Upbringing and trauma histories, all of these things play a role in what is our window of tolerance. So our window of tolerance is the determinant of our capacity. So this is our stress threshold. And so some people have a narrow window of tolerance. And this creates a limited capacity to handle stress. And so when we have a narrow stress threshold, we have a narrow window to be able to handle stress. Anytime you fall outside of this and we go into chronic stress, this causes the nervous system to become upregulated. And if we are stuck there over time, this leads to disease, burnout, and dysregulation. When we have a wide window of tolerance, this creates resiliency. This means we are resourceful under stress. And so we want to have a wide window of tolerance, a greater capacity. And of course, there's different things that can play a role in our window of tolerance. Our allostatic load is the total amount of stressors that our body accumulates over time. So this is everything that we talked about that influences our health. This is our circadian rhythm, this is nutrition, this is going to be exposure to light, toxins, what's going on with our gut, relationships, it's everything that we talked about. And so all of these stressors fill up our bucket, and our allostatic load, this is the same thing as our window of tolerance, is just another way to look at it. We all have a different size bucket. We all have a different window of tolerance. And depending on your genetics, your trauma histories, some people have a bigger or smaller bucket. But what happens is when this bucket gets overfilled and begins to pour out, this is called allostatic overload. And this is where we see disease and dysfunction to begin to occur within the body. So with my own health issues, being told I needed to have my entire large intestine removed, when I started to really try to figure out the root cause of what was really going on in my body, one of the first things that I discovered is that I had SIBO. I had small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Now, a lot of people would say that SIBO was the root cause. SIBO was not the root cause. SIBO was part of the symptom. What was the root cause? Well, the root cause was all of these stressors that essentially caused my body to go into allostatic overload, impacting my gut. So at this time in my life, I was competing in bodybuilding competitions as a fitness model. I was maintaining about a 10% body fat. And so what do you have to do to get to that low of a body fat percentage? You have to go into caloric deficit dieting, right? Which is a stressor on the body. I was training really hard also to try to maintain as much skeletal muscle mass as possible. So here we have physical stress. We have metabolic stress. I did have some genetics that played a role. I actually have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, which is hypermobility, which can massively impact the nervous system and the gut. And I had a lot of emotional wounds that I had yet to really do the work to really see how that was impacting my beliefs and my identity. So for me, it was the total amount of all of these stressors that caused my body to go into a sympathetic state. And we want to go into a sympathetic state. It's when we get stuck there, right? That it becomes the problem. So it was all of this chronic stress. My body went into allostatic overload. And what happens to the body? Well, the gut completely shuts down. It stops producing digestive enzymes. The motility comes to a halt. Thyroid slows down. Hormone production also slows down. And this created the perfect terrain, especially with the motility issues, for bacteria to begin to overgrow in my gut, leading to small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So SIBO was not the root cause, you see? It was the amount of stress. It was allostatic overload based off of me going outside of my window of tolerance. Now, I am somebody who has and was born with a smaller window. I know that about myself. And a part of that had to do with my upbringing and some of the things that I walked through in my own life. But I've been able to actually widen that window of tolerance. I have a very sensitive nervous system. I know that about myself. It's a gift. I'm very in tune with people energetically. But also too, I have to pay extra attention on when my body, it's becoming too much and when I need to pull back. And so ultimately it was all of these things that led to disease and dysregulation, where conventional medicine wanted to remove my entire large intestine because I couldn't use the restroom. And that was the solution. Thank God I found functional medicine. And I was somebody who was willing to take radical ownership, because functional medicine, we know on its own, isn't going to fix us. For you guys who've gone through the functional medicine process, you know it's going to give you more answers, but who has to do the work? We got to do the work. And so all of these things have to be something that we're paying attention to. So how do we create strength and resiliency? I like to think of building muscle. How many of you guys lift weights in here? How many of you guys are trying to put on some muscle? I'm forever bulking. I'm trying 20 pounds in. So how do we build strength? Well, we go to the gym and we apply acute stress. We're stressing the muscle, right? We're trying to lift as heavy as possible and actually pushing the body past what it can currently do. So this is a stressor. It's an acute stressor. But then we're pairing that with rest, recovery, good nutrition. And as a byproduct, what happens over time? The body builds back stronger. So we call this a demand match. So when the stress matches the recovery, and this is how we create resiliency, this is how we create stress. But what happens when demands don't match? When there's a ton of stress. So let's say you're somebody who wants to put on muscle. Well, your body doesn't care if you want to put on muscle. It cares about the stimulus and it cares about the recovery. So let's say you want to put on muscle, but you also want to lose a bunch of fat at the same time. This is a ton of us. Help me put on 5 pounds of muscle, but also I want to lose 15 pounds of fat. So I'm going to be in a caloric deficit. And also I'm not sleeping really good at night. Stress, caloric deficit, stress. I'm overtraining. I'm training really hard because I want to put on muscle. And then maybe I have some work stress, family stress, relationship stress to go along with it. What happens to the muscle? Does it get stronger? No. The muscle actually gets smaller. It gets weaker. So that's the same thing that's actually happening in our body. So when stress is higher than our body's ability to recover, we get weaker. When our stress matches our recovery, we create resiliency. We create strength. Resiliency is not about how much stress you can endure. I'm going to say that again. Resiliency is not about how much stress you can endure. It's about how well you can recover. And for most people, what leads to disease, it isn't some big catastrophic stressor, but rather the silent accumulation of small daily micro-traumas that go unnoticed, that the body never gets a chance to fully recover from. It's these small micro-traumas. And these micro-traumas are everything that we talked about: the blood sugar fluctuations, the low-grade gut inflammation, exposure to toxins, sleep disruption, unprocessed emotions, nutrition deficiencies, repetitive negative thoughts, circadian rhythm disruptions, food sensitivities, overtraining, poor breathing patterns, loneliness, infections, excessive screen time. Hello, America, right here. And what happens is these micro traumas cause our body to go into sympathetic overdrive, which place a constant load on our metabolic resources, disrupting the gut microbiome, interfering with vagus nerve signaling, which is the mind-body connection. It's our nervous system, impairing liver detoxification, destabilizing blood sugar, throwing off the nervous system, diminishing cognitive function, and over time, this creates wear and tear that ripples through every system. Disease, dysfunction. because of the accumulation of all of these micro traumas. Healing, growth, and restoration can only take place when the body is in a parasympathetic state. This is where we heal. This is where we recover. And going into the sympathetic state, that's not the problem. We don't want to avoid stress. If we avoid all stress, what happens? Well, we become fragile. We become weaker. So the goal is not to avoid stress. Acute stress is anabolic. Acute stress paired with recovery helps us build strength. It helps us build resiliency. What we're talking about here is chronic stress, when the body is stuck in the sympathetic state. And even for some people, going into the freeze state. They often don't talk a lot about the freeze state. We just talk about the parasympathetic and the sympathetic states. If anybody's read any of Dr. Porges' books on the polyvagal theory, he talks about it's not just fight, flight, and rest and digest, but we have a freeze response, especially for people who experience a lot of trauma in their life. Disassociation, shutdown, that's the freeze response. And so this is also a part of the vagus nerve, but this is still a stressed response over time. This is burnout, right? So the body goes into a heightened stress state, but then if we're stuck there over time, what actually happens? We go down. That's the freeze state. And it's in these states that over time, disease begins to occur. Healing, growth, and restoration can only take place when we're in a parasympathetic state. So addressing the nervous system has to be a part of what we're doing. So this is a bell curve that I created to try to put all of this into a visual. So over here, when we have no stress and we also have a lot of recovery, this is not ideal. It's not ideal. A lot of people will think that that's the ideal place to be. Now, I will say this. If you have been over here for a long time, where you've had a very high allostatic load, a high amount of stress, we need to go over here for a while. We do need to go over here because we've been over here, stress high, recovery low. The gut's messed up. We have hormone issues. We have all this stuff going on in the body. So we now need to go to the opposite side over here. We need to decrease stressors as much as possible. We're never going to be able to completely get rid of stress. We need to increase recovery so the body can heal. This is healing. We can't stay there. This is the first step, because if we stay there, over time we get weaker. This is the person who's done the elimination diets. This is the person who controls their environment, avoids anything that will ever trigger them, has to get the perfect night of sleep. And then if one thing comes into their life that's stressful, oh my gosh, they go into a big flare, right? We don't want to be over here, but we need to be here sometimes for a while if we've been over here for a while. On this side, this is when stress is high and recovery is low. Disease is created here. So we definitely don't want to be here. We want to be here. This is where strength and resiliency is created. So this is sort of like the dance. And it's happening on like a micro level, really. It's like a little back and forth, really. What's happening is we experience stress, acute stress, we recover. We experience stress, we recover. But we're cognizant of our allostatic load, the total amount of stressors that we have going on in our life, physically in our body, externally, our emotions, and then what our recovery needs to look like for those demands to match. And this is where we ultimately want to be, where there's imbalance. And of course, it's never going to be perfect. We're going to have times where there is more stress in our life. But guess what? We need that much more. If you have a lot of work stress, if you just had kids and you're not sleeping very well, you need to focus that much more on increasing recovery, right, to go along with it. Because that amount of stress without recovery, you're going to end up here. So I want to share a little bit about my functional medicine framework for reclaiming freedom. So one of the problems with conventional medicine that we all know is it is not a root cause approach. It is the medicine of what instead of the medicine of why. But something else that I see quite a bit in even the functional medicine space is I see a lot of people focusing on here. And this is phase one of what we focus on. This is the foundation in healing. This is when there's disease, dysregulation, you have gut symptoms, maybe you have PMS symptoms, maybe you're going through menopause, you have hot flashes, skin issues, whatever it is. So you're symptomatic. That's an indicator that there is disease, dysregulation that's happening in the body. And so we need to increase recovery and we need to reduce that allostatic load. This is where we focus on healing the gut. We need to focus on bringing the body back into that parasympathetic state, increasing recovery. This is doing things like grounding exercises, breath work. This is, all the things that you can do to help regulate your nervous system as much as possible. Same thing with your workouts, reducing inflammation. So that's the first step. And a lot of people are really good at this part. They've been in the stress place for a really long time. And they're like, okay, I need to get better. Go into recovery. Important. We have to go there. We can't stay there. So there has to be a second phase where we begin to rebuild and reintroduce. So this is where, after we've been in the healing phase for a while, we then want to introduce stressors paired with adequate recovery. So it's not just going back. This is the person, what we don't want to happen is the person who's been in that healing, that recovery place for a long time, and they're like, I feel better. And just they go back to eating whatever they want. They go back to just party lifestyle, right? That's not going to help us. But we want to introduce stressors. We want to be able to introduce foods that we eliminated. We want to be able to get back into more of our social life. We want to increase our workouts. We want to transition from moving from gut healing, which is a diet, into gut health. That's a lifestyle. And then as we begin to introduce these stressors paired with adequate recovery, and the body's not going into a bunch of flares, we can move into phase 3, which is resilience and optimization. This is the fun part to me. We want to get here. But I will say, a lot of people want to be in phase 3 when they should be in phase 1. So this is the person who has chronic bloating, they're constipated, they can't go to the bathroom, they have skin issues, they can't sleep at night, but they're like, I want to put on 5 pounds of muscle and I want to lose 20 pounds. And you're like, all right, I will work magic as best as I can. And not to say that we can't do all of those things, but the order in which we're going to be focusing on them is going to be what's really important. And so if we focus on trying to add more stress to the body, building muscle, trying to get as lean as possible, that's a stressor. We talked about that. So if we focus on that here, we're going to struggle to heal. And so the order of things is really important. Functional medicine is an art. I always say functional medicine is an art. It's how we address things in a specific sequence. We can't address everything all at once. And so eliminate stress as much as possible, focus on recovery, heal the body, slowly introduce stress, food reintroductions, increasing workouts. Here, we should not be doing powerlifting. We should be doing like parasympathetic type workouts. We should not be training for a marathon. I've had clients who've come to me who are like, I want to run a marathon, and then they have no menstrual cycle, and then they have chronic gut issues, and they can't poop. We're going to really struggle to heal the body, right, if that's what's happening. So we have to be here. We don't love being here, but if we want to actually heal, we have to be there for a while. Slowly introducing stressors, allowing the body to adjust, to know it's not going to go back into a flare, but also for us mentally too. If you had gut issues like I had, it was scary. I wanted to stay in my bubble of all the safe foods that I ate and controlling everything. But that's not freedom. That's not freedom, right? So we have to begin to introduce some of these stressors, and then we can move into resilience optimization. So we can focus on performance. You want to run a marathon? Great. That's a lot of stress on the body. The body needs to be able to recover, and we need to have reduced a lot of those internal micro traumas that could also inhibit your body's ability to recover. You want to train for powerlifting competition. You want to do an NPC bikini competition. My mom, age 65, oldest woman to compete in a powerlifting competition. Now she wants to do an NPC bikini competition. I'm like, oh my God, it's insane. Yeah, now she wants to do an NPC bikini competition. It's incredible. Like, it's possible, but we have to do it in this specific sequence. And this is where we can focus on aesthetics, cognitive function, all the fun and sexy things. So just a couple of client case studies. This is my client, Deanna. She came to my practice because she had recurrent SIBO. SIBO is my area of expertise. And so she had gone to multiple specialists, done all the treatments, so the Zavaxin, the neomycin, the herbal protocols, but none of them worked. She'd feel better for a little while. With some functional medicine testing, we found she had digestive insufficiency. She had a suboptimal thyroid. Her body was stuck in that sympathetic dominance place, so she had a lot of metabolic stress. She was really lean. She had some MMC disruption, so this is her motility in her gut. She was on oral contraceptives, which there's some research that can disrupt the gut microbiome. She had toxic heavy metals, and then she had some methylation issues. So she had a high allostatic load, is what that's saying. So phase 1, we had to clear the SIBO. We had to reduce her workouts and her training. We had to focus on restoring her digestion, focusing on getting her nervous system back into that parasympathetic state. We could then move into reintroducing foods, building the microbiome, and then aligning her nutrition and her recovery with her training, where then later we could focus on resiliency, how to maintain gut health under stress, optimizing performance, aesthetics, all of the things that we want to focus on. And so you can see her incredible transformation here, going from chronic gut issues to resilience and elite performance on the athletic side. This is Daniel. He was a CEO of a top financial company. High stress, Daniel was. He had reoccurring diverticulitis, bloating, anxiety, brain fog. We found that he had dysbiosis, imbalance of bacteria, everybody has that. SIBO, parasite, same thing, operating in sympathetic dominance, chronic antibiotic use. So these are all still part of the root causes, even though it's not just what came back on his labs. Leaky gut, insulin resistance, and he had a lot of inflammation. And so we had to first work on the nervous system. You hear me say that a lot. Work on the nervous system, eradicate the parasites, which is a stressor on the nervous system in the body, eradicate the SIBO, repair his gut lining, and we did some different somatic practices. We actually did a lot of breath work with him. We then went into rebuilding, restoring his metabolism, building back his microbiome, and with his training, we paired that with HRV, if anyone does any heart rate variability tracking, so he could pay attention to his recovery and know when it was a good time to push in the gym and when he needed to focus more on the recovery side. Some fasting we were able to introduce, and then later we focused on mental clarity and just helping him perform better in his role as a CEO. And so we're able to get rid of his gut issues. You can see some of his aesthetic changes, and then working a lot on his mental clarity, brain fog was all gone. So let's talk about the core systems that determine our capacity, because we've talked about that it is our capacity that plays a role in freedom, ultimately. It's our capacity that allows us to be able to handle all of what life brings. So another problem that I have with conventional medicine is it fragments the body. So you go to the gastroenterologist, you go to the endocrinologist, you go to all the different ologists, specialists. They're all working in their silos. And so they all do their testing, but they're only looking at that body part. It fragments the body. Where functional medicine, we're looking at how everything is interconnected, how the gut influences the brain, how the adrenals influence our hormones, We're looking at how everything is interconnected within the body. And something that my practice also focuses on is psychophysiology. So this is how the mind influences the nervous system, how it influences the body, but also how the body, our gut, influences our nervous system and influences our mind, because everything is interconnected. I'm assuming everyone in here has heard of the mind-body connection before. In reality, it is not mind-body. It is mind-body. It is all one, because we are a interconnected system. And so I'm going to talk a bit about the body, specifically the gut, nervous system, and the mind. So the gut-brain axis, I think a lot of you in here know the power of the gut playing a role in all of our health. My practice takes a gut-centric approach to health specifically for that reason. You get the gut better, the nervous system begins to regulate, mental health improves, the gut plays a massive role. And when we have a healthy gut, which this photo is kind of hard to see, but what this photo is showing is the gut lining is sealed and tight. There are good bacteria in control. The brain is protected, therefore in calm. And so how do you feel? Clear thinking and focus. You're emotionally stable. You have good energy. You're able to handle stress. And you feel capable and resilient, and you have emotional capacity because your gut health is good. But what's happening here? You have an inflamed gut. You have low capacity. So this photo is showing that the gut lining is leaky. Bad bacteria have overtaken. Inflammation is flooding the brain because an inflamed gut leads to neuroinflammation. How do we feel? Brain fog and confusion, anxious and overwhelmed, exhausted. Everything feels hard and we can't handle normal stress, all because of the gut. So leaky gut releases inflammatory modules that cross into our circulation, causing brain inflammation, leading to anxiety, depression, and brain fog. Dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of our good and bad bacteria, is going to cause altered neurotransmitter production, leading to mood instability, poor stress tolerance. SIBO. Toxic metabolites are released very often in small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, leading to neurological symptoms. And this is why healing the gut is not just about digestive symptoms. It's about reclaiming your mental and emotional capacity. We have to heal the gut. The nervous system, we talked a bit about this, that healing, growth, and restoration can only take place in the parasympathetic state. Healing, growth, and restoration can only take place in the parasympathetic state. And so we have to work on getting our nervous system regulated. One of the problems that I saw so much with people coming into my practice who were wanting to heal their gut, who were wanting to heal things that were off internally in their body and they had symptoms, is the nervous system was off. And once I learned that the nervous system has to be in a regulated state for healing to even occur, and helping my clients work on that, we started to see real shifts and changes. Our nervous system also plays a role in how we see the world. So when we're operating from a parasympathetic state, which is part of the vagus nerve, it's the ventral vagal side, the world is welcoming. It's beautiful. It's inviting. I feel okay, alive and well. I feel filled with possibility. When I'm in a sympathetic state, the world is chaotic, unmanageable, terrifying. I'm out of control, dysregulated, in danger. When I'm operating from that freeze response, which is part of the vagus nerve, it's the dorsal vagal side. This is our most primitive part of our nervous system. So this is our modern vagus. This is our most primitive vagus nerve. So this is like reptiles, right? We see them go into that freeze mode when they think they're going to die. we can go into that too as humans. And so when we have activated the dorsal side of the vagus, the dark side of the vagus, the world is unwelcoming, dark, empty. I am untethered, I'm abandoned, I'm lost. This doesn't mean you're not actually mobile when you're in the state. This is disassociation. We see this all the time in trauma. Women who've experienced terrible traumatic things, rape, and afterwards they look back and they think, oh, why did I do anything? Why did I stop him? Why did I just let it happen? Maybe I wanted it. Shame. Oh, so much shame. She didn't have a choice. Her body was operating in the freeze response. We don't often get to choose. This is not based off of mindset. Our nervous system responds to what's happening in our body. It's happening based off of traumas we've walked through, the different wiring that happens. And so you could have an idea all day long that, okay, if someone were to come behind me, I would like punch them and I'd kick them and all this would happen. You don't know that. You don't know that. Your nervous system is going to respond before you even have a thought about it. And so understanding this was so powerful for not only my own healing journey, the emotional side of healing, helping my clients understand that, but also as we started to work on the physical healing side, this had to be a big part of it, getting them back into this state. So some of you guys said you tracked HRV in here. It does. Heart rate variability. Okay, some of you, one of the best tools for measuring your nervous system. So heart rate variability reflects your autonomic nervous system state. So what does that mean? So when we have a high heart rate variability, so there's a lot of space between each heartbeat, that indicates that the body is in a parasympathetic state, right? We all know what happens to our heartbeat when we're stressed. It's really rapid, right? And then it also can become inconsistent. So this is a low heart rate variability. This is a sign that we're operating in more of that stress state. And so why this is an incredible tool is because if you notice your heart rate variability is low, that's not your time to push. You have a very high allostatic load right now. You need to focus on recovery. And if you have a low HRV and you go try to push, you go try to train, you add in more stress, you're going to stress the system. You're going to create more issues. And so it's a really great tool to create a better indicator of where you're at with your nervous system and when's a good time to push and when's a good time to pull back. So Whoop, Oura Ring, incredible tools. This is Dr. Eugene Lipoff. He is our Chief Medical Director at Rachel Scheer Nutrition. He pioneered a treatment called the stellate ganglion block, otherwise known as the God shot. He has a Netflix documentary coming out on this soon. And for people who have PTSD, who are stuck in sympathetic overdrive, or maybe trauma is playing a big role, this has been a revolutionary treatment. And so when we think about PTSD, we call it a disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder. And oftentimes, yes, we'll look at the veteran community. We work quite a bit with them, but we don't get to decide what is trauma and what's not trauma. Trauma is what happens inside of you. It's not what happens to you. Our genetics can also play a role because this is why one person can experience an event and develop PTSD, where someone else can experience the exact same event and they don't. Genetics. We pass these down, actually. So if you have the genetics for PTSD, you may actually have a bit more of that narrow stress threshold. Me. And so it's more likely for you to develop PTSD, to go into sympathetic overdrive. It's an injury on the nervous system. That is what is happening with trauma, with PTSD. And so you don't have to have experienced something like rape or gone to war or any of that to actually have it. It's not what happens to you, it's what happens inside of you. And some of the biggest indicators of nervous system dysregulation: poor sleep, inability to sleep throughout the night, anxiety, impending feelings of doom, fear, a lot of fear. These are all signs of trauma physically in the body. I don't care what happened, not to say that, of course, what happened mattered. I'm looking at this through a functional lens and what's happening in the nervous system. And so treatments like the SGB block, what is that? What they're actually doing here is it is a temporary block, think like lidocaine, that's done in the sympathetic nerve in the neck, so the fight or flight nerve. And it lasts about 8 hours. It wears off. I always tell people, let's say you have a TV that's not working. How I fix everything is I just unplug it, and I just hope it works better when I plug it back in, but it often works. Seriously. So that's kind of what is happening with this. And so when we've experienced trauma, people have PTSD, it's an injury on the nervous system. So there's various autonomic neural pathways that have been created as a byproduct. And so there's things that are happening around us and the nervous system's activated. So many people are living chronically in that fight or flight or that freeze state. And it's really tough for them to get out of it. They have to overly self-soothe, so they have a very narrow stress threshold. And so this is a root cause approach. It's revolutionary. It's not always my first option for a lot of people, but I love to talk about it because it's a really great option. And what happens is that block actually helps to reset the nervous system. It's like unplugging the TV for a little bit of time and plugging it back in. And a lot of those autonomic neural pathways that have been created are undone. So it doesn't mean that you don't get stressed. Somebody cuts you off in traffic, or someone's about to run into you. You're going to go into a stress response, as you should. We need that stress response. But you're not going to get stuck there. That's the difference. So this is actually the results of one of my clients, her HRV before and after doing an SGB block. So you can see here, the white, this is stressed, how much time she was spent stressed during the day, and the blue is restored. Most of the time during the day, she was in that stress state. This is after. The relaxed is the blue, so minimal amounts. Changed her life, her outlook on the world. It allowed for us to do some of the other work on healing her gut, and it was that much more effective. Okay, so we've talked about the body, the gut. I could go into so many areas within the body, but I really wanted to focus on the gut, the nervous system. Now I want to talk about the mind, our identity and beliefs. So every single time you think a thought, your brain physically changes and new neural pathways are formed. This is called neuroplasticity. And old ones either strengthen or weaken. Our genes shift, and then our hormones respond as a byproduct. When we have an identity rooted in shame, not enough, victimization, and sickness, your brain releases stress hormones, inflammation increases throughout your system, your immune function decreases, healing processes slow down, you become hypervigilant to symptoms, and you literally become better at being sick. When you have an identity rooted in wholeness, love, acceptance, and growth, stress hormones regulate. Inflammation decreases. Immune function strengthens. Healing accelerates. You notice progress, possibilities. You literally become better at being well. All based off of your identity and your beliefs. It's powerful. This is something I say all the time. The way in which I relate to myself directly creates and impacts all of my circumstances and relationships. I'm going to break that down. So, the way in which I relate to myself, my relationship with myself, the view that I have of myself, my identity directly creates and impacts all of my circumstances and all of my relationships. If you believe you are broken, you will forever struggle to heal. If you believe you are a victim, the world will create circumstances to keep you powerless. If you believe you are unlovable, the world will reflect rejection back to you. If you believe you are not enough, the world will mirror scarcity at every turn. But if you believe you are whole, true healing will begin. If you believe you are powerful, the world will rise to meet your strength. If you believe you are love, the world will reflect love back to you. If you believe you are worthy, the world will open its doors. Our beliefs and our identities, they play a massive role. The ultimate determinant on whether somebody is truly free, in my opinion, lies in their level of consciousness. How many of you guys have ever met somebody who was physically sick, maybe even given a terminal diagnosis, and yet they appeared to be more free than most people operating in perfect health? Raise your hand. You met somebody like that? How is this possible? How is it possible that somebody who could literally be on their deathbed in physical pain every single day operate from such non-resistant love, joy, and authentic freedom? Consciousness. Your consciousness determines how you perceive reality, how you respond to life, and what you believe is possible. It shapes your relationships, your worldview, and your capacity to love and be loved. This is a visual diagram of the different levels of consciousness. If you literally Google online levels of consciousness, this will pop up. Everything under here operates from force. It's moving against the flow of life. And everything up here operates from power. Capacity is created from here. An example I like to give of consciousness is, let's say you see a homeless man laying on the street. If you're operating from a consciousness of shame, you'll see this homeless man and you'll have the feeling of disgust. You will literally view him as the equivalent of human trash. Now, if you're operating from a slightly higher consciousness and you're operating from pride, you'll see this homeless man and you'll think, well, we all get what we deserve. He must be lazy or weak. I work hard to be where I'm at in life. It's better than at least the shame one. Now, if you're operating from a consciousness of acceptance, now we're moving out of force and into power, you'll see this homeless man and you'll think, well, he's doing the best with the life that he's been given and the circumstances that he's in. Now, if you're operating from a consciousness of love, you'll see this homeless man and you'll feel empathy. You may even think, man, I wonder what this man walked through to be where he's at today. His upbringing, his trauma, what kind of thing that he's faced in life. You may even feel compelled to help this man. What changed out of all of these circumstances? Did anything out here actually change? No. The only thing that actually changed was everything that was happening within here. Whether we were operating from a place of resistance, creating our own internal resistance based off of operating from these lower levels of consciousness driven by force, or if we're operating from true power. And in those higher states, we felt open. Plays a role in our capacity. It didn't affect him, it affected you, right? That's consciousness. These lower levels of consciousness are driven by force, shame, and fundamentally flawed. You start to look and also see shame and everybody else, judging everyone. Guilt, I don't deserve happiness. Fear, life is dangerous, I must protect myself. Anger, the world is against me. Pride, I must prove that I'm superior. These lower levels of consciousness are driven by survival. They operate from the belief that we are lacking and must obtain or control in order to be okay. But when we begin to shift these internal beliefs and begin to align with higher principles, we begin to operate from true power. Courage. What Roxy talked about. Courage comes from the heart. I can face what I fear. Doesn't mean fear is absent, but I can face it. Acceptance. I am the creator of my experience. Reason. I can understand and choose wisely. Love. I relate with compassion and forgiveness. For self, when you have compassion for yourself, do you have more compassion for other people? You see, all of this is an internal game, right? If we want to have compassion for other people, you can't do it. You have to do it for yourself first. If you have shame here, we're going to be judging everyone around, right? When we feel love, compassion for ourselves, we're able to give that to other people. This isn't about everybody else. It's about our own internal freedom. And when we begin to shift from these lower levels into these higher levels, we begin to operate from true power. And power comes from aligning with the energy of life itself rather than moving against it. So energetically, this is what this looks like in the body. Force, so those lower levels, energy is stagnant. It's flat. There's always a means to the end. It actually requires energy to operate from this. It requires energy to operate from fear, to have guilt, to all of these things. It is a stressor. It's taking energy from you. And how is that impacting the nervous system in your body? And how you feel, how you see the world. When we operate from true power, energetically, this is what this looks like in the body. The energy is creating within itself. You actually don't need more energy. It's actually giving you energy when you're operating from that place because you're operating from true power. And in the end, power will always overcome force. Always. So the 3 pillars of freedom we talked about: external freedom, the container, physical freedom. This is the foundation. This is our health. This is our foundation to even be able to open our capacity to be able to experience freedom. Freedom of consciousness, the ultimate determinant. We all know that person. External freedom was missing. Physical freedom was gone. They had this. They were still free. All of these equals the fullest expression of human potential. We are here to expand. If we are not growing, if we are not expanding ourselves, we're dying. I love to look at nature as an example because nature is always moving. It's always growing. There's so much life. And that's why when we align with the energy of life, we're operating from power. That is how we feel within. That's true freedom of where we're operating from here. And then that's going to play a role in our physical health. It's going to play a role in our relationships. Freedom. So let's get a little bit practical. Key biomarkers and therapies. Tracking. Everybody start tracking HRV. Aura, Whoop. Really important to know where your nervous system is at. If it's time to push or it's time to rest. A lot of these will also track sleep. So what does your sleep look like? I don't care about time in bed. Are you getting deep sleep? Are you getting REM? That matters on recovery. Testing, everything that Becca and Liz does, inflammatory markers, cortisol stress response, nutrient status, gut test, work with them, functional medicine. Like they can do all of this here. And this is really important because what Becca and Liz are doing is they're helping create the foundation for freedom. Therapies I talked about today, at least, therapy is great. But SGB, DSR does the dual sympathetic reset. So a quick check-in, because I just gave you guys a ton of content. This is how my brain works, literally. Back on this, we're like, can you come talk? And I'm like, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about consciousness. I want to talk about the gut. And it all ended up being this that you saw today. So if everyone has a piece of paper, I want you to draw this across. Turn it up. And I want you to write in each of these quadrants, first body, then mind, then spirit, then heart. This is a self-check-in. On a scale of 1 to 10, with body, where are you at? How do you physically feel in your body? I'm not talking about mind, physically in your body. If you were to get quiet, are there aches? Are there pains? Bloating? How do you physically feel? I want you guys all to give yourself a score out of 10. Mind, how are you mentally? How are you? On a scale of 1 to 10, what are your thoughts on a daily basis? Fear, guilt, love, acceptance. Give yourself a score. How is your mind, your mindset, your thoughts? Heart, our expert over here. How is your heart? This is different than your mind. Roxy talked about this. Your heart. How do you really feel? This can be your emotions too. And the last one is spirit. Another way to think about this is your connection to something greater. Purpose. Connection to a higher power, God. You all have to be connected to something greater than ourselves. Where would you score yourself? Oh. So, you're not going to share this with anybody. This is all just for you. It's important to check in with ourselves every now and then. How are we doing? How am I? Right? And so this is for you. And so maybe there was something I talked about today that was on the mind side. And you're like, that's where I need most of my work. I need a lot of work here. Maybe it's physically. Maybe you're like, I got gut issues. I'm going through, menopause. I have all this stuff going on. Maybe it's, I don't feel like I have a purpose. I don't know what that thing is right now. Maybe it's the heart. Maybe it's you feel disconnected from yourself. It's your emotions. Maybe there's a call to action for you today. So I want to close with this. Freedom. It's something you don't think about until it's gone. This is my dad. My dad and me. You both are me. My dad used to have a very normal life. Was married, had 3 kids, and over time, I've watched my dad's health physically, mentally, and even in his entire finances and his capacity to take care of himself disappear. I watched him lose his freedom. My dad experienced a ton of trauma when he was growing up from his father, my grandpa. My grandpa would speak death into my father. He would say things like, "You're never going to amount to anything. You're going to be a trash man when you grow up." Terrible. And my father did his best, and he vowed to never, ever speak anything but life into his kids. But my dad, he was impacted nonetheless. And over time, I watched his mental health decline. He experienced so much pain that he actually created an alternate reality that he began to live in. I'm a big believer that mental illness is a byproduct of trauma that's been unaddressed, that's been passed down, and also physical issues in the body. He developed a staph infection after a foot surgery. He was an athlete, varsity soccer. He did varsity baseball in high school, long distance runners. His bottom of his foot broke down, got surgery, contracted a staph infection in his bone. Was never able to walk again, severe lymphedema. And so actually they're talking about amputation of his leg. All of it impacted here. Divorce. Was unable to take care of himself financially, so was put into a conservatorship where he actually lost his external freedom, his ability to even have money. Seeing my dad and where he's at in life, it breaks my heart every single day. Because I've seen what happens when trauma goes unaddressed, when the body breaks down, and when we lose our capacity. But I've also seen the opposite. I've seen what happens when you are willing to do the deep, deep inner work to heal your mind, your body, your nervous system. When you're willing to be the person in your family to break generational trauma. And when you raise your consciousness, realities change. And if trauma is generational, so is healing. And when you heal, you don't just heal yourself. You heal your children. You heal your children's children. There's the ripple effect with everybody that you come into contact with. And when you reclaim your capacity, you give others the permission to reclaim theirs. And when you say yes to freedom, you give others permission to say yes to. Healing is the process. Freedom is the ultimate expression. So the question I have for all of you, what will you do with the freedom that you've been given? Thank you.